and welcome to FXWB New Beginnings podcast with Michelle. How are you guys doing? I hope the holidays are well with you. We know what happens at the end of the year, the last quarter of the year. We are busy, 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 doing a lot of different things, out with family and friends, having business get togethers, trying to get all our house in order. Literally, that's what we do in the Caribbean. We get our house in order for the coming of Christ. If you are a Christian, this is the time of year we think of Christmas. We have Hanukkah, we have Diwali, we have Eid al-Fitr. So a lot of different festivals of honoring Jamaica happens around this time of year. And we tend to be around family, friends, and relatives. We are doing things that we find cheerful and uplifting to our lives this time of year as we end the year. However, sometimes we do not have our families close by. And today, here in FXWB New Beginnings podcast, we are going to talk a little bit about that when we are not with our families to celebrate the holidays with them. If you know, you should. I am from the Caribbean, I'm from Trinidad, and I am not with my family here in the US, but I make family. How I do that? By creating a community. Here at FXWB New Beginnings podcast, we look at the well-being shift. Functional well-being, we look at well-being holistically, like that of finding your purpose, honing in on your health, learning and living in an environment that will help you find your purpose, building communities, having relationships, and looking at security in your maker as well as your finances. So here we look at holistically looking at our well-being so that we can be able to live a healthier lifestyle in total. And today we are looking at well-being from the relationship community side. We are all part of a community. We are all part of different communities. And I would hope that you would join this community, FXWB, New Beginnings Podcast, as we share other stories. We share other stories through listening to what they have gone through to bring them out. Things that they have been bestowed onto them, their talents and gifts that they use to help others. Sometimes it just might be an experience that they may have gone through that can help us if we are currently going through such a situation. And today, with our guests, we are going to do just that. The holidays can be a sad time for others. I said it. The holidays can be a sad time for others. At least for me, I know of a lot of families that have had lost many during the holidays. And they may be grieving that loss. Even if that loss was 10 years ago versus a month ago or 5 years ago, when the holidays is around, we remember the times we've had with families that we have lost. Sometimes it might be a hard memory, and sometimes it might be really beautiful memories that you may have encountered with that loved one. We want to talk with someone today who would love to share this information with us. And when I say information, it's her story, how she has dealt with that grief and that loss, and actually anchor herself to come out of that loss and use it as the propeller to move forward. So even though we may be anchored in something that is grieving us or hurting us, we could actually use that and shift it towards something that propels us to even something better and higher. So, welcome, Miss Danielle Brown Davis, to FXWB New Beginnings podcast. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me at this time. I know you're a very busy woman, but I thank you for taking the time out so that we could help others through the holidays. So, share with us a little bit about you. Who is Danielle
Yes.
Brown Davis?
Yes, I'm a writer, author. I'm also a copywriter, a Jill of all trades, I should say. And I also own a copywriting slash social media agency. So I
Mm,
basically help small business owners, coaches. I help them to create content that gets attracted to their ideal clients, content that
oh.
converts into sales and leads.
So I want you to share with me a little bit of who was Danielle before 2020, 2021,
Mhm.
2022.
Yes, basically. Oh my goodness, it's such a story. Where should I begin? I grew up in the church. My grandmother was a pastor, and my parents. I actually lost my parents early. My mom was 43. She passed of breast cancer, and my dad, he had something called PNH, and I had lost him. It's a long story. That's like a completely different podcast for that. So then I met my husband about in 1995. So it was like I went from my dad's home because my mom passed, so just me and my dad. I went from my dad's home directly to being married. So I was married for 27 years. We struggled the first 18 years to have children. I had like four miscarriages. I say a fifth miscarriage because my mind goes blank. I don't remember when actually that happened because it almost became like natural, kind of like, oh, well, I'm just having a miscarriage. So that we struggled. The first 7 years, it was like, wow, we're not having children yet. I didn't go to any specialist yet because um, I was kind of nervous about finding out why it was happening. So we just went on with life, and our goal was to focus on our writing, writing books, and going on to speaking engagements and other things that we desired to do. And it took 18 years before I had my first daughter, Miranda. She's 8 today. Yeah, that she's
Oh,
basically a miracle,
oh,
a
yeah.
miracle child. Yes.
Uh-huh.
In 2011, we I went on this kind of like health journey. I was like, wow, I really want to focus on health. I started jogging, exercising. I was introduced to plant based eating, juicing. So I got my husband to do the same thing, and he lost 40 pounds. And he felt marvelous. He's like, wow, Danielle, I feel so great. We would watch videos together. And then juicing daily. I remember when we first got our first NutriBullet, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, June 19th is the date that we're getting our NutriBullet. I cannot wait to start juicing. We juiced every day religiously.
Uh-huh.
And then I had a miscarriage, and I'm like, Lord, why? Because at that time I had a different mindset. In my
Yes.
mind, I felt as though it was God that was causing me to lose the babies. But at that time in that mindset, I was like, oh wow, why do you keep allowing me to get pregnant? Then I keep losing the child. And then at that moment, during I was having a miscarriage at that time, I felt this peace fall upon me. And I felt like, I'm not going to feel sad about this. And it was June. My husband and I, we went to visit family in Nevada, his mom's side of the family. And I didn't know I was pregnant. I did not know I was pregnant. And our plan was when we get back from vacation, I was going to go to a specialist to really find out. And it was on the North Shore in Long Island to find out why, the reason why I keep having miscarriages. That's not how I found out.
Oh,
Mm-mm.
wow.
I found out, I actually found out in 2000, going backtracking. At that time, moving ahead of myself, when we got back from the vacation, I found out I was pregnant. I took the pregnancy test. I was like, ah. But before that, really quick,
Mhm.
I found out the reason why I kept having miscarriages. I went to, my husband and I were invited to a Spanish service in Huntington, 100% Spanish. My husband spoke a little bit of Spanish. He understood more. He's actually part Spanish. He was born in Venezuela, and his,
Okay.
yeah, and his mom's side of family and dad a little bit are also from Trinidad. His mom was,
Yay!
yes, in
Well,
Tobago.
I'm from
Yeah.
Trinidad.
Yes, Tobago. Yeah. Yeah. So all these years, I only know how to make Spanish foods and Trinidadian food. I know how to make roti, the insides, but not
Good
the skins.
for
Yeah.
you. Good for you.
Yes.
Look at that. You see?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes. And we were at this event, and it was totally Spanish. And the pastor, he didn't speak English at the time. He had an interpreter, which was his son. So he had asked me and Roberto, can I pray for you? And his son interpreted in English, okay, we would like to pray for you. So the pastor had said his name, oh my goodness, his name escapes me. I forgot his name, but he's actually from Honduras, and Honduras. And he said the reason why you keep losing babies and having miscarriages is because of a tragic event that happened to you when you were a child. And I'm like, what tragic event? And when I was 5 and 7 years old, I almost died 2 times. My dad saved my life. I had a 2 seizures, epileptic seizures in my sleep. So he kind of like saved my life. The Holy Spirit led him on what to do. He gave me mouth to mouth. And you're not really supposed to give someone mouth to mouth who's having a
Jesus.
seizure, right? But he felt led to do it. I came awake. The second time it happened, when I was 7, I knew instantly that I was healed as a kid. I was like, oh, I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't have to go to the hospital. I'm healed, mommy, daddy. And of course, I hear the ambulance coming and they take me away, and I'm in a hospital. So that was the reason why I kept having miscarriages. Somehow, whatever happened at that time caused me, I would go into the first 5 weeks. I think the longest I've ever been pregnant without losing the baby was like 10 weeks. And I would just lose the baby every time. The doctors could not figure out why. And they're like, kind of like, well, that's the way nature is. That's how the body is. That's unfortunately that happens. That's the reason he had said, today I'm going to pray for you. And God is telling me that you're going to have a little girl. You're going to have a baby girl, a healthy baby girl. So he prayed for me. I was all excited. Yeah, Roberta was like excited. That's when I had that second miscarriage. I was like, oh, what happened to the prophecy? Oh my goodness, I'm having a miscarriage again. But long story short, when my husband and I came back from visiting family in Nevada, I was jogging one morning at the beach because we lived 3 minutes away from the beach. And my uncle had a house on Long Island in Bay Shore, and we stayed there. And every morning I would jog. This one morning, as I'm jogging, I used to like to jump over this little log that was close to the beach. And I felt like not to jump as high as I normally do. And I was like, okay. I go to the dollar store because I had to pick up something. And then there was a whole stack of pregnancy tests right in the front where they usually keep the gum. And I'm like looking at it, I'm like, okay. Like, why is it like right there? So
Right.
then I felt led, maybe I should buy one. I was like, I'm not gonna buy one. Because I didn't feel any difference. I didn't
Right.
miss any. I did miss a woman. I missed my lady, my
Yeah.
grandmother calls it Annie Franny, so I missed Annie Franny. And my husband he was like, you know what? After I told him I was pregnant, he was like, oh yes, Danielle. He's like, he knew something because I asked him to pick up something, the pads from the CVS while we were on
Right.
vacation. He was like, I know you haven't opened them, you haven't
Right.
used them. And I was gung ho about mushrooms because remember we were
Yes.
eating. I still eat healthy and everything, and we're gonna get to that soon. But I was eating a lot of mushrooms, like sautéed mushrooms, and oh wow, I was like going bananas with the mushrooms. So yeah, so we get back, and then I'm pregnant, and to make a long story short, I have a healthy baby. That was a journey because although I
Yes.
was eating healthy, although I was exercising, I was considered high risk. So they needed to deliver the baby right away, my daughter, Miranda, right away, because they were like, you know what, the baby's not thriving. I was in I think it was in my 7th or 8th month. It had to be around the 8th month or so. And they're like, the baby's not thriving. We have to take the baby. And I was like, well, I'm okay. I want to go through a full, my prayer is that I go through a full term pregnancy, 9 months. So that I had to have a C-section, and it went by like, it was fast. I was up and walking the next day.
Right.
But
Right.
that's part one of the story. And everything, as people say, hit the fan in 2022,
Okay.
the day after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Later on, the day after Thanksgiving, 2022, my husband gets sick. And I just figure, it was like, well, I don't know, maybe I put too much broth in a turkey or something like. So I didn't know. We just figured like, oh, I don't know. But it seemed like between the day after Thanksgiving and Christmas, he just was not himself at all. He
Oh,
wasn't
wow.
himself. And I noticed that when we left, because originally we're from Long Island, we moved to Pennsylvania, and then we moved to Ohio. And I noticed that he kind of slacked off a little bit with his. I mean, he still had to eat healthy because I made the food, but he started adding candies to his diet. What is it called? Because he liked to eat Skittles, but he didn't do anything like really drastic. He kind of slowed down with his exercising, and he had the candies and sweet juices, when he would go out. And then he didn't do anything like really, really drastic. So then I just noticed that he just wasn't himself. He was moving very, very slow. He was losing a lot of weight. Like he already lost weight because of the healthy eating journey,
Right.
but he went from like 175 to 145. And then he just was not himself. And I remember one day we were having like a little text argument, and it had to do with money. And my his focus was, well, we really need to think about life balance. We need to because I added another income stream, and we were always busy. He said, we really need to like just focus. I'm going a little ahead of myself. Before he started getting sick, he said, we really need to focus on life balance. We need to take some time off and to rest and to just to think and just to talk and plan, Danielle. That's what he was telling me. This is before Thanksgiving. And so going back to between Thanksgiving and Christmas, he lost a considerable amount of weight. And then one day we would have the text, we were texting, and he said he saw blood in his urine. And at that time, I was in a different mindset with healing, because when he really got sick, I went into like a course on healing. Everything was healing. But at that time, I had limited knowledge about healing. Like I believed that Jesus could heal, but in my mindset, I'm thinking only if he's in a good mood. That type of mindset thinking at that
Right.
time. So I was
Right.
nervous. I was like texting him. I was like, oh, okay, wow. Are you still having that issue? And I'm like worried. I'm like, oh my goodness, everything came tumbling down. I'm like, oh my goodness,
Right.
what's going to happen? I'm like beginning to pray. And they said, well, you need to go to the emergency now. And he said he was going to go in the morning, and they couldn't find anything. Later on, he just got worse. He was losing more weight. And I was like, wow, how much more weight can you lose? And he started fainting. He would just drop, and I would have to pray and kind of like wake him up, and then he would go to the emergency, and they diagnosed him with diabetes, and then they gave him medication, and they were like, "Phew." I was like, "Phew, that's the reason why he saw the blood in the urine. That's why he kept fainting." And like, well, we can correct that. We know what to do, with juicing. I mean, we slacked off a little bit with juicing. We're just like, go back to the regimen of juicing, exercising, and already eating and making healthy foods. And then he knows not to eat Skittles anymore, for a while at least, only as a treat, and the sweet juices. So he knows that. Yeah. So, and then it just kept getting worse and worse, and he would faint. I remember one morning I got up, and I have my 8-year-old, so I don't want her to like witness everything, and trauma in her own mind. So I'm waking up and I hear him going to the bathroom. My mind said, I'm kind of, worried. I don't want him to faint or whatever. He goes into the bathroom and he faints. He faints. I just run in and his leg is kind of like blocking the door. And meantime, I'm praying and I'm pushing it open. He hit his head on the toilet and he fell. And then immediately I'm like, we have to call the emergency. We have to do something. I'm like kind of like in panic mode, but at the same time, I didn't want to make him nervous. I was kind of like, I need to take a deep breath, focus so that he doesn't get scared. So I'm like, so how are you feeling right now? Stay with me. He's like, I'm fine. He's like, I'm fine. He's like, he didn't want to go to the hospital at the moment. Later on, I found out he explained that because he was scared. And he went to the hospital and they diagnosed him with a mysterious illness. And that's when the dream of him getting zapped came back to my mind, because before the hospital incident, I'm not a type of person, I'm a dreamer. I'm not a type of person to have, at that time, to have visions. But I had a vision of someone in a hospital bed with a mask on, but the person wasn't in a hospital, they were at home. So I immediately just kind of like opened my eyes. I was praying. As soon as I sat down to pray that morning, this is before any hospital situation, I closed my eyes to pray and immediately I had a vision of someone with the mask. I opened my eyes and I was like, nope. I'm not gonna think about that anymore. I just erased it from my mind. The next day, that's when he was in the hospital. So it was one thing after another. And mysterious illness. And then they said that he had nodules, cancerous nodules, and they went to look at that. And like all of these illnesses, I'm like, what is going on? And at that time, I was an extreme worry ward, worried about everything. I'm worried about him. And I'm like, oh my goodness, and the business. And I'm like, business doesn't stop. And I'm like, I think this is the reason why the Lord wanted me to automate my business, because I'm like, I need to automate right now, but I couldn't do that. I had to continue to market the business, to do the work. So I'm dealing with this illness, and I have my daughter also, and my daughter's homeschooled, and then I have the business. So I had to focus. I couldn't cry. I couldn't sit there like, oh my God, what do I do? My parents were gone, and I couldn't really talk to anybody because I didn't know what was going on myself, So I didn't know. So it was just me and God. I'm like, I don't quite understand what's going on. So what happened, to make a long story short, but this is the important part I have to add before I get to the incident where life completely changed. All of a sudden, it was like, well, Danielle, we got with some family together in a Zoom meeting. It's like, well, Danielle, I know you like your business and everything, but have you considered you might have to quit your business? And I'm like saying to myself, I'm gonna quit my business. What am I going to do? So what I'm going to do, go out and get a regular job? No, they wanted me. Everybody has, I understand that everybody does what they need to do. The idea was for me to quit my business. And at that time we were renting a kind of like like a co-office space, a beautiful co-office space, very inexpensive, right? Very affordable. And it was an office building, and the goal was for Roberto and I had a section for him. We were going to get our own little office space. We're going to upgrade to a larger office space. That was the goal. And he was going to write a play. We were going to produce it in Dublin. We had movies. My cousin had a movie, just adding to it. We had a lot of plans. And that was on hold. And they were like, well, Danielle, I understand you have this office space, but the money that you paying from the office space, you could use that, to save that. And I was like, well, it's kind of paid in advance. He's like, is there a way you can get the money back? And I was like, oh, okay. And then they're like, well, you might want to consider quitting your business because you need to focus on your husband. So you're going to have to go on public assistance. You need to go down right now. Okay. And that they were adamant. And I was like, well, I can't do this. Like, why can't you do that? What do you mean you can't do that? Are you thinking you're better than other people? You can't have this attitude that you don't want to do this. I'm like, it's not that I'm thinking I'm better than anybody. I have these plans and goals, but Danielle, it's not about you anymore. it's not about you, it's about your husband. I know it's about my husband. That's why I have this business, so I could spend time with him and take care of him. So it became like when he went to the hospital and life completely changed because I had to administer his medicine, administer his insulin. I was like, oh my goodness, I had to be trained to take the insulin, and I had to I still had access to the office. So I had to do it in a way where I would do my Zoom calls, client calls at the office, and then come back and then make sure Roberto's okay. And then I have my daughter, then I have all of this at the same time. So one day, and this is when life completely changed. One day, my husband had a heart appointment at the hospital because it also became a heart issue. And at that time, I'm like, one thing after another. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. They found out he was okay with the cancer. There was no cancer. And I was like, praise God, there's no cancer. And then they said he had this heart valve issue. Okay, so then his all of a sudden, Roberto changed overnight. I don't know if it's medication or anything. His body kind of like blew up. And if you looked at him, you would think that, oh, well, the reason why this man is sick is because he didn't take care of himself. And that wasn't the case. It was like, okay, one moment Roberto's skinny, and then the next he's like blown up like a balloon, and he couldn't walk. He had to use what is it called? A walker. I had to help him to the bathroom. He did not like, because a man, he's used to being a
Right.
man and doing his own thing. It got to a point where I had to help him to bathe.
Mhm.
And he was kind of like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, that's okay. I will take care of you. So helping him to bathe and helping him to eat. And in the middle of the night, I had to wake up like 3 o'clock in the morning sometime if he had to go to the restroom because I didn't want him to pass out. So, and then in the meantime, I didn't want my daughter to wake up and come in the room. I was like, oh, what's going on? So I had to do it. I had to be quick. I had to be fast. So that day, he had a heart appointment. It was in the morning. I chose a morning time because his nurse was going to come back around 2. After 2 o'clock, I had to set aside time for Miranda and the business. So I was like, okay, today's going smoothly, but I noticed that he moved real extra slow. He was already moving slow, but he really wasn't, something was different that morning when I helped him with the restroom. He was kind of a little bit more out of breath than usual. Then we used Uber, and then he was walking towards Uber fine. I was like, wow, you're doing really, really well, because the goal was to get him, because when he wasn't able to walk, the goal was to get him back to walking, but he was so out of breath because of the illness. He didn't feel motivated to do as much walking. I got some barbells because he ordered some because he wanted to get his arms buffed. He was like, oh, got to get rid of these skinny arms and get buffed again. So he was going to show me too, to help me,
How to work
meaning had
out.
experience doing that, but he could barely do 5. And I was like, well, that's okay. Well, that's because, you'll be able to do like how you did before. So he was
Mhm.
walking towards the Uber, and we got outside, and he was kind of like, okay, I can't wait. Like, kind of like, I can't wait to get inside the car. So he sat in the back. That was the issue because I had to get him because his body was bigger because of, I don't know if it was, remember, it was the water. It had to do with the mix of the medication and the water and the illness. So they put his legs, I put his legs into the vehicle. He was like, okay. I was like, okay. I was like, oh my goodness. And they were going to have a wheelchair waiting for him when he got to the hospital because that's where the appointments were. I was like, okay, I guess they're going to help get him out the car because I don't know how I'm going to do it. So, and I thought to myself, how am I going to get him out the car when we get home? Because it was hard to get him inside. So then I buckled Miranda up, and I get in. The driver was really, really cool. The car was very comfortable, a little small, but it was comfortable. So he was kind of like, okay. And then the guy's taking off. He's not moving fast. He takes off. He stops at the first light. And that's when Roberto's kind of like, oh my goodness. He's like, can you have him roll down the window? And I was like, okay. We're rolling down the window. And this is I forgot to mention, this is February, around February 15th. So it was a little chilly outside. So we rolled down the window. The driver's like, sure, roll down the window. And he started breathing fast. And I was trying to help him to calm,
Calm
because in the
down.
past, a couple of weeks from that date. That happened before, and I had to call the hospital, but he was okay. He was able to, I helped him to control his breathing, and he was fine. The doctor was like, okay, he's okay. So I thought it was the same situation. I was like, okay, just take deep breaths, and just relax. We're going to be okay. We're not too far from there. The windows are rolled down. And then he's like breathing heavily again. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I don't know what's going on. And then he started slipping away. And then he took my hand, he held my hand, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's not a good sign, because when people usually do that, you see in the movies, that means that they're like, okay, bye. I'm like, that's not going to happen. So I don't know why he's doing that. And then he holds my hand, and then I'm like, oh, okay. He's breathing heavily. And then we had to stop the car. I had to tell the driver, my husband, I don't think he's breathing. We have to stop the car. And he's like, oh, okay. In the meantime, the light turns green, which is amazing. There was like hardly any traffic. The light turns green. We stop over by a hospital called Huntington Bank. And we stopped there. In the meantime, he's like doing everything. He's like breathing hard. And
today we learned a lot about Danielle and her family, and this story is such an intriguing one. We have to continue it next week. So tune in next week on FXWB New Beginnings podcast as we finish up Danielle's story of her family. Sending love to everyone out there for the holidays.